right, everyone can hear me all right? All right, very good. So I was thinking about, what to do for this week, and I was thinking about, sometimes people ask me, Dan, what did you do in school? What did you learn in school? What's it like being in the seminary? How does that work? I remember when I first entered, someone asked me, so do you just pray all day? The answer is no. I was also asked, are you allowed to have fun? That answer is yes, if you're careful. So what I thought today is I would talk about a little bit about the seminary itself, kind of based on my own personal experiences of it. What I'll do is I'll talk about the two seminaries I went to, one in Columbus and the other one in Cincinnati. So not all seminaries are like this, but I imagine they're similar. And again, so this is kind of based on my own personal experience. So before we actually get to that, though, there was a time when there were not any seminaries. There was no school you went to or anything of that sort. So how were the priests trained in those days? Well, what you would do is, it was kind of like a master-apprentice relationship. So someone would say, hey, I think I want to be, or I feel called to be a priest. So he would basically go to a local priest and kind of stand under his wing. So he would kind of follow him around. So basically, if you still have that system today, I would come across this church, I'd go up to the priest and I'd say, hey, Father Leo, I'm thinking about wanting to be a priest. Can you show me the ropes? And Father Leo, being who he is, he will say, of course, yes, of course, I'd love to help you. So he would do that, and after a while, whenever the priest felt it right, he would contact his local bishop and he said, hey, I got this guy, he's been training, I think he's ready to go to be a priest. I've taught him everything I know, I think he's ready to go. And the bishop will say, okay, I trust your judgment, I'll ordain him. And that's basically how it was done for a while. Around the 16th century, however, around this time, it became apparent that a good number of priests simply weren't trained very well. They knew how to do the sacraments and all that, but for whatever reason, they couldn't explain theology very well. At least that's what I read about. So, around that time, they actually began to start schools for priests in training. And a big person who was involved in this was St. Charles Borromeo. He's kind of considered the guy who started the seminary system. And seminary itself comes from the word for seed or seedling. So the seminarians are trained, they're the little seedlings who will eventually sprout into the priests of today and tomorrow. And so now all these dioceses established these schools, these seminaries, and that's what I got to go through. So when you enter seminary, there's a couple. You don't always enter at the same level. You see, there's two kind of different groups of seminary. Well, technically three. There is the minor seminary or college seminary, and that's basically you go to this seminary if you have no bachelor's degree of any kind. You have no college degree, therefore you would enter college seminary. In the past, there used to be high school seminaries. Those are very rare to come by these days. I know a couple of our older priests in the diocese, they would have gone to high school seminary as well. So if you don't have your bachelor's degree, you go to college seminary. Now, let's say you have your bachelor's degree already. You decide to enter seminary. But you don't have enough of the philosophy requirements, because when you go to seminary, you need a good amount of philosophy studies. Well, then you would enter a system known as pre-theology. And that's usually a 1 or 2 year system in which you're basically getting all your philosophy requirements. You already have your degree, and that degree can be in anything. I remember one guy, his degree was in, I think it was golf course management. It can literally be any degree. As long as you have a bachelor's in something, you're good to go. Now, if you have your bachelor's degree, you have all your necessary philosophy, then you can go to major seminary, or what we basically just call theology, because that's what you're going to be studying for the next 4 or 5 years. So, for me, myself, I entered seminary when I was 19. I had done a year at the University of Akron before, back when I was studying to be an engineer. As you can tell, that didn't work out. And so after that 1 year, then I entered and says, okay, Dan, you will go to the college seminary, where you will work on getting your bachelor's. And oh, by the way, that year of college you did already, we're not going to be able to transfer everything in for you. So I basically had to do another 4 years in college just to get my degree. But that's okay. That's okay. I understand they wouldn't accept everything I took. They did not accept my gym credit. And a few other things, but that's neither here nor there. So, let's say you entered right out of high school though. You're 18 years old. You would do 4 years of college seminary, then you would do your 4 years of theology. Now, let's say you just finished your bachelor's degree somewhere. Then you would do your 2 years of pre-theology, then you would go and do your 4 years of theology. And if you just happen to have gotten your bachelor's degree, and it happened to be in philosophy from a good school with good philosophy classes, then they would put you right in theology and you're out in 4 or 5 years. It's not a bad system. So, when you actually get to school, all seminaries follow a basic structure. And they're centered around something we call the 4 pillars. These are 4 aspects of learning, of life at the seminary that everything focuses around. There's the human pillar, the spiritual pillar, the intellectual pillar, and the pastoral pillar. So the human pillar focuses on your growth as a person. Not only your growth as a person, but how are you relating to others? How do you see yourself? How do you interact with other people? Very much building up of you as the human person itself. And so there are things and so the formation team, the group of priests who kind of watch over you, they'll look for these things, are you getting along? Are you getting along with people? Are you helping out with the place at things? Are you getting to your classes on time? Are you sleeping in? Or are you being lazy? That's the kind of human formation they want to develop. Not the negative things I mentioned. Positive things. Just developing as a good human person, one who will be able to function well as a future priest. Then there's the spiritual pillar. How is your relationship with God, your relationship with the church? They look at, how is your prayer life? Are you doing any type of spiritual reading? Now, when you get to school, you are assigned 2 directors. A formation director who basically looks at all of your growth, how your schooling's doing, how you're interacting with everyone, kind of like the overall picture. But then you're also assigned a spiritual director. And, they assign you a spiritual director at first, and then afterwards you can actually choose a priest who you think is going to work well with you. And that's in order to develop your spiritual life. How are you praying? How often are you praying? What kind of prayers are you doing? How is your spiritual life? How are you at Mass? Do you have any types of devotions? Are you doing any spiritual reading? Things of that sort. Spiritual life is very important for a priest, as you know. And so developing a good spiritual life is very important for the priest. Next, there's the intellectual pillar. This is basically your learning, your academics. Learning what the church teaches, learning about the world, the history around us. And not only learning it, but learning how to apply it and integrate it in our lives. So, you learn all this theology, all these high concepts and big words and concepts, all this sort of. Well, that's great. Now, what do you do with it? And more importantly, how would you relay that information to everyone else? They're obviously not going to be taking the classes you are. So how would you explain that? In other words, okay, I'm learning all this stuff. So what? Well, the stuff we learn is important, and we also have to learn, how can I teach others, the people I'm going to minister? How can I teach it in a way that they will understand? I mean, if I just keep using big words, which I was trained to use, but no one else is, well, I might as well be speaking a different language to you. And sometimes I am, because it's a lot of Greek and Latin words that I'm using. But sometimes it is a different language. The final pillar is the pastoral pillar. And this is about learning to, of course, serving the people of God, outside of the seminary. Because after all, a priest isn't simply just going to be saying the sacrament, performing the sacraments, and then nothing else. He's going to be out there ministering to his flock, to the people. And so, during those years, every year, you're usually assigned some group to go to, some pastoral group you were assigned, you and a couple other guys. And I'll just kind of list off all the things that I was exposed to while doing this. So I visited nursing homes. I helped teach homeschoolers. I went to prison to minister to the prisoners. It was just a side note, it was actually kind of funny. While talking to the prisoners, we would kind of have a debate on who had it worse, who was really in prison. Was it us or was it them? They would complain about their food, and I says, well, you should see the seminary food that we have. You think you don't have privileges, you ought to think the things we got to do. We also have to be up at a certain time, be here at a certain time. Just fun debates. Although in retrospect, I'm pretty sure they had it worse. Ministry with the homeless. Adult faith education I did. I did a couple of weeks working at a soup kitchen, helping to teach RCIA. I did a whole summer of hospital ministry for 10 straight weeks. And then, of course, you have one's parish ministry, an internship where they actually spend time at a parish. These are all different ways, and then there are other things as well, but those are all the things that I did to kind of expose me and help prepare me for ministering to the people in all sort of different walks of life and situations. And so all four of those are put together in the hope of really building a well-rounded, well-balanced individual who is an upstanding individual, who has a good spiritual life, who knows the faith and is able to teach it and explain it, and is able to serve the people of God. Seminary focuses around those four things. And they drill it into us the best they can. So, this time I want to talk a little bit about the individual places I went to. When I was sent to college, I remember when I first was inquiring about joining the seminary. I, of course, met with Father Leo, who was the vocation director at the time, and he actually, he kind of helped guide me, and I actually went to go visit the seminary before I entered. Seminaries usually will have like a welcome day or a live-in weekend where guys who are thinking about the seminary can actually go visit for a couple of days. So in spring of 2005, I did that. I went to the seminary in Columbus, spent a couple of days there, talked to the guys there, and basically afterwards I called Father Leo back and I said, "Okay, son, yeah, I think I'll go do this." And so I did. And so being only having 1 year of college, I needed a bachelor's degree, so they sent me to the seminary in Columbus, which is called, its full name is the Pontifical College Josephina, or most people just call it the Josephina for short, or the PCJ. And so that school has both a college, a pre-theology, and theology program. So I went there in the college program. We had our own little building there where the other college seminaries lived, a little bit separate from the theology wing of the building. And at the college seminary, it's very much a liberal arts school. And so when I was there, they offered 5 degrees you could get. All liberal arts degrees. You could get philosophy, which is what most people did. You could get history, English literature, Hispanics studies, and classics, which is the study of Latin and Greek. Even if you didn't major in philosophy, you still had to take, let's see, when I entered, you had to take 24 credit hours of philosophy. That was the minimum requirement. While I was there, they increased those requirements to 30 credit hours. I was grandfathered into the old system though. And so that's just the minimum requirements. And if you wanted to major in philosophy, you had to take a little bit more. Now, me being someone who loves history, I of course decided to get the history degree. So I took a bunch of history classes and it was great. I enjoyed it. And that's what I got my bachelor's in. And so a lot of what you have to do is study philosophy. Now, when you study philosophy, initially you're thinking, why do I got to do this? What does this have to do with anything? It actually has to do with a lot, because throughout the history, the church has used philosophy to come up with concepts to explain and define their theology. Therefore, you need the basics of philosophy first to build up your knowledge base so that you can get into theological concepts and learn how to explain them and where they came from and where the words came from and all that. So you need that philosophical base. And what kind of philosophy do you talk about? Ancient philosophy, medieval philosophy, modern philosophy, philosophy of God, metaphysics, philosophy of ethics, and all these different things. So they really ground you in those things. I had to take a lot of it. Other things they'll teach you in school, history, of course, and mostly not so much church history, although some of that's there, but just general history, Western civilization, and you can take other electives. I once took an elective on the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. That was actually a really fun course. You take some theology classes, but they're just kind of what we'll call beginner's level theology. So you do take some theology there. And because this is still a accredited college, you still have to get an actual bachelor's degree. Yes, you do have to take some math, some writing, a psychology course, a science course or two. I was able to get some of those transferred, those basic courses. So I didn't have to take too much of those. Although I will say that when I was in Akron, I was taking college calculus. And then when I got to the Josephine, they said, okay, you need another math credits. We offer general college math. Not the most exciting of classes, but I had to take it. Wasn't too hard, but I got through it. And so you still had to take these. It is still an accredited college. You still get an actual bachelor's degree. It's just a lot of philosophy to go with it. So besides that academic life, what about everything else we did there? The student life. Part of being student life is, you live in our building, with others. When I started, there was about 40 guys there in the building with us. And when I left, there was about 60 so. So every year, we had more and more people in the college, which was kind of nice. Our rooms were pretty small. I think about 9 by 14, which I guess is typical. A single room, shared bathroom, showers at the end of the hall. Typical college life, I guess. I've never really been anywhere else except that one year at Akron, so that's all I got to go by. But we were in charge of kind of maintaining our own building. Yes, we had maintenance people there, but we also had what we call house jobs. Everyone had to be responsible for something in the house. So someone to clean the floors and vacuum, someone to clean the bathrooms, the staircases, the rec room, shovel sidewalks, clean up the leaves during the fall, all sort of things we had to do. Other things we would have to go, occasionally we would have to go to meetings for the whole student body. We would have formation meetings, which usually a priest would talk about something about priestly life or life in the seminary. We would have spiritual meetings where usually one of the spiritual directors would give a talk on some aspect of the spiritual life he wanted all of us to know. And then business meetings. Business meetings were not the most... You didn't look forward to business meetings. They often took a lot of time, and you wondered, did we accomplish anything while we were here? And those were basically to kind of say, okay, here's what's going on this week, here's what's to look out for. Are there any groups that are meeting for this or that? Or just kind of see what's going on this week, or is there anything in the house someone needs to bring up, any concerns, or is everything going well, or things of that sort. Sometimes they could go an hour and a half. We always thought they could go quicker. But business meetings, that's just how they are. So what about, so let's say you're not studying or you're not doing any work-related stuff. What about just regular relaxing, hanging out? A couple of things that we could do there. We had a rec room downstairs in our basement, at a TV, some couches, you could watch movies down there. We had a pool table, ping pong, air hockey table, little things like that. We had our own pub in the basement, actually, where we would serve food and drinks, alcoholic beverages if you were at least 21 and over. You had to be important with that, because at the college seminary, you do have guys who are under 21. And I actually worked at the place for 2 years, and my last year I actually ran the place. Very well, I'd like to think. And I actually had a lot of fun doing that, because that had its own responsibilities, because I was in charge of stocking the place, keeping it running, setting the prices, making sure people paid their tabs. Oh, so much trouble with that, people not paying their tabs. But that was just part of the learning experience. I really enjoyed that. And then you could be in charge of, other things. We had a gym at school, which had a basketball court, a bowling alley in the basement, swimming pool, which actually seemed to be closed often for maintenance trouble. But so fields to play baseball and soccer and football, so plenty of sports opportunities. And if you didn't like any of that, you just go to someone's room and just hang out, or hey, let's go to a movie across the theater across the street, or hey, let's go out and get something to eat. You didn't have to be there for all the meals. You could go out from time to time to get off campus, which is always nice. There was plenty to do across the street. So, we were able to get off, even though we had to be there for certain things. Speaking of sports, we actually have, at the Josephina, they have an annual football game between the college and the theology students. We call it the Mud Bowl, because the first time they played it, it was raining and it was completely muddy. And so I played it in every year. And it's just flag football. It's not tackle, although sometimes tackling did occur, nonetheless. We could get heated every now and then. It was kind of a pride thing, because you got to keep the trophy for the whole year when you won the game. So it was a kind of source of pride of winning the Mud Bowl every year and then defending it. And my 4 years there, we were 3-1, which was pretty good, because normally the college got crushed. But when I was there, we did pretty good. Not saying it was because of me, but we just happened to be pretty good those years. But we would also have a basketball team and a golf team and a soccer team, and we would actually go around during the year and play other seminaries. Other seminaries actually hold basketball tournaments and golf tournaments, and so it was actually fun to actually go play sports against other seminaries, other seminarians, and then, meet them, hang out with them. And then, of course, so what does your school do? Man, I like that your school's doing that. Yeah, well, your school gets to do that. And, comparing seminaries, who has it better, who has it worse. What else is there to talk about besides theology? Of course, we bring that up too. What else do we talk about after all? One of the nice things, though, I liked about the Josephinum, though, was you had guys from all over the place. So there are seminaries all across the country, although most of them are in the East and the Midwest. So not every diocese has its own seminary. So you got to send them to elsewhere. A bishop can send to any seminary he wants. So it was nice, actually. I knew and became friends with guys all the way out in Arizona, from about as far north as Wisconsin, as far east as Virginia and the Carolinas, as far south as Louisiana and Georgia, and everywhere in between. Now, because the seminary was in Columbus, most of the guys were from Ohio. Well, I'd say maybe half were from Ohio, at least in my day. But it was nice, you got to see these guys from all over the country, and you really got a good sense of the Catholic faith across the country. What's the church like outside of Northeast Ohio? How do they do things elsewhere? It was really nice to kind of get that information, just kind of see, how they were brought up, what their expectations were, what their traditions were. It's really neat to see that. We also had international students, guys from Mexico and Guatemala and Puerto Rico and a couple of the other Hispanic countries. I think we had some from the Philippines as well, and Vietnam. So now you had a little more of that international perspective of the church, which was really nice to see, to really learn about that. So what about a daily schedule? Our days were pretty much regimented pretty well. So if I remember correctly, this is going back 6-7 years now. Usually we would have to get up for morning prayer about 7 o'clock, sounds right. Mass at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. Although sometimes Mass was at noon, which was kind of nice. You could sleep in a little bit. Classes began at 8 o'clock, if you had an 8 o'clock class. Sometimes you didn't. Those were good days. You'd have afternoon classes. You'd have evening prayer you'd have to do around 5:30, 5 o'clock. You would have holy hours occasionally that you would go to. Occasionally you would do night prayer together, pray the rosary together. And then you were also expected to do prayer time on your own, anytime throughout the day in which you felt was best for you. So that was part of this, forming you in the life of prayer, but still expecting you to kind of do a couple of things on your own. So, for example, I think we met once a week for the rosary. But that didn't mean we just want you to pray the rosary once a week. We kind of expected you to do more than that. We only do some of the prayers in common, but they kind of expect you to want to start doing them on your own as well. So that's part of that forming us in the spiritual life. And so like when you would meet with your formation and spiritual directors, it was up to you to set up those times and dates. They weren't going to come hunt you down, except maybe if you weren't doing anything at all, but they expected you to be responsible, sign up for these things. And they expected you to sign up for things around the house to help out. Again, part of that formation. We're going to help you out, but we still want you to learn to do this on your own. And then we also had yearly evaluations to do. I didn't like evaluations. You had to, there was a lot of forms to fill out, end of year evaluations and all that, so you got to do those things. You had to meet with the priest at the end of every year, just basically say, so how is your year going? You know, here's what we thought you were doing good at, here's what we thought you could do better for next year, this and that. Now, that being said, one thing I kind of had to learn pretty quickly while I was there is the notion that while you're there to, not because you know for certain that you're going to be a priest, you're there to discern if God is calling you to be a priest. And so that's part of it. And so naturally, throughout the year, guys will discern out. They will leave. Sometime at the end of semesters, sometimes just in the middle of the year, they feel, you know, God's not calling me to this, so I'm going to discern there's really no point in me being here anymore, so I will discern out. And usually, from when you start in college seminary, of all the guys who start out there, maybe about 30% of them, 30-40% will actually get ordained. The others will discern out. And that's always been the case. Priests have told me that even in the old days when the number of seminarians was very high, still only like 20% actually made it to ordination. Again, part of that was to discern, is God calling me to this? And if not, that's fine. Now, there would be occasions where the school would ask someone to leave. They basically said, you know, we don't think you're called to this. A story I heard once was a guy was called into the office, and the priest was basically saying, you know, we don't think you have a vocation. And he says, well, what do you mean? I'm always praying all the time. I study well. You always see me in chapel. He says, yeah, we understand that. Here's the problem, though. You see all those guys out there who are playing sports or getting involved in other things? You're not doing that. You know, if you have a very good prayer life, that's great. Maybe you're called to a religious order, but not the diocesan priesthood. And so part of the formation team is to kind of look at the person, discern, you know, are they called to this kind of life? Or are they not? And so it's partially on the students' discernment, it's partially on the formations team and their evaluation. Can this man, can this individual perform well as a priest out in the parishes? Because that's most likely what he will be, a parish priest. And so that's part of that evaluation. So, in 2009, I graduated, got my bachelor's degree in history, got my philosophy requirements. I'm ready to move on to theology. And so, I was then transferred to a different seminary, and this was kind of on my own one, because I just wanted to get a change of locations, you know. I didn't want to stay in that same place for another 4 or 5 years. I said, oh, well, let's try something new. So they sent me a little bit further south, further down 71, to Mount St. Mary's Seminary of the West. Why is it called of the West? Because there's a Mount St. Mary's Seminary in Maryland. We're called of the West because when the seminary was founded in the 1820s, Cincinnati was kind of the West. We wouldn't call it West now, but that's kind of the name of it. So I was sent here for this major seminary, for theology studies. And again, the 4 pillars are still there. Same basic regiment, although some differences. And the seminary in Cincinnati is a little bit smaller. So I think when I got there, there were 40 of us. Again, there's like 60-some now. But I will say this, the rooms in Cincinnati are nicer. Anyone who's been to Cincinnati, the seminary, will tell you that. Perhaps they're too nice for us, but I didn't complain, nor did anyone. So here at Mount St. Mary's then, what we would do, our studies are now focused on theology. And so we had a whole set of theology requirements that we had to do in the next 4 years, 4 or 5 years. So what was I studying at this point in time? I was studying Trinity. First of all, I was studying systematics. And what is systematics? Well, that includes everything like Trinity, Christology, Mariology, anthropology, ecclesiology, eschatology, soteriology. Do you even know what I'm talking about with all those words? Basically, the study of Christ, the study of Mary, the study of the church, the study of the human person, the study of the end times, the study of sin, everywhere in between. This was systematics. And so you had to take a lot of courses in that. We'd have to study liturgical matters. So we'd have to study the Mass, study the sacraments. If you were here when I presented on the sacraments months ago, a lot of that was taken right out of the courses that I was taught. That and the catechism, which of course we were taught from anyways. So a lot of what I learned is kind of what I'm presenting back to you. Again, it's part of that intellectual formation of taking what you learn and attempting to explain it back to everyone else. It's part of that intellectual pillar. We had to, of course, go through biblical studies, study the Old Testament, the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, Ringo, George, all of them. So, although those last two are non-canonical. You won't find those in the Bible. So we had to study basically all the Bible. We had to study church history. Of course, me being a history guy, I enjoyed that a lot. We had to study ethics, church morality, Christian living. We had to study what we would call practicums. In other words, how to do the sacraments. Every year you had to take another course on preaching. So you had to take a lot of preaching courses and preaching practicums. We had to take courses on business and how to handle money and how to understand church taxes and all that stuff. Not enjoyable courses, but something you need to know. And oh boy, did they teach us how to sing. We had to take a lot of courses on music. Everyone had to be a part of the, what we would call the school. And so every couple of years, all the students, whether you could sing well or not, had to be a part of this and sing at certain, I lost the word, at things. That's what I can come up with. It'll come to me later. We had to sing. And not only that, but learn to sing parts of the Mass and other liturgical things. There's the word again, things. And other liturgical matters. And then sometimes, if you were good enough, they would have you sing, they would have you be the cantor at Mass, or a little part of a little Latin solo we would do for some of our Masses. And then when you were a deacon, they taught you to basically sing all the parts while you were there, everything that you were allowed to sing. We would do that. And so that was all the learning and such that we had to do in Cincinnati. So what about student life? Basically, kind of the same from college seminary. We still had our house jobs, cleaning up the place. We also had a rec room and a bar in the basement, although I did not run that bar. It was still good, though. Again, our school hosted one of the golf tournaments that we had every year. I would always be on a team. We did not come in last, although we came close. We did not come in last place. Again, we had games, movie nights, guys just hanging out just like before. Times to get off campus. We also had free weekends. See, normally you would have Mass at the seminary. But usually once a month you had a free weekend where you were expected to go to Mass somewhere else, anywhere you could go to. You could go to the parish just down the street. You could go to one 20 minutes away if you wanted, because you liked the priest there. The idea was, occasionally to go out, get into a parish setting, because at school, we're very concerned about, okay, are we doing this exactly the right way, exactly by the book? Okay, and everyone's just kind of watching. It's like, okay, we're going to do the Mass perfectly. We're going to make sure we're doing it right, and all this. Well, then you get out the parish setting, you realize the real world doesn't work quite that way. To be out, there with the people, with all the other distractions that you would not exactly find at the seminary. I don't know of any seminary students who whine during the Mass, but out the parish you will find young people who will whine, usually infants. And just to make you remember, these are the places that you're going to minister to. Yes, it's nice to have the seminary Masses because they're nice and they're usually done well. But you still got to remember where you're going to be at. Not to say you can't do Mass as well at the parish, but I'm just saying. And so we would have these free weekends to get away for a little bit. If guys lived close, they could go home. If their parents lived close by. My parents were 5 hours away, so I often did not go home on free weekends. But sometimes you go visit other people, or spend time in a parish with a priest you knew. So you had time to get out, which was nice. Part of our community living, we had once a week we had something called community nights. So we would have a Mass in the afternoon, and it was more of a formal Mass. So we were all up in our that means you had to wear suit jackets and all that, and then you'd have a nice formal dinner downstairs with everyone, and then afterwards you would have some type of community event. Sometimes we would call it forced fun. But there were usually nice events that we would come down there, some type of games or sports. We would have a bowling night sometime, or, just very nice things to do as a community. It did not mean you had to participate in the sports, but to be there, to just be there with the guys and the priests and just kind of build up the community there. That was always part of your human formation. Do you get along well with the community there? And so what was our basic schedule like there? Let's see. Morning prayer was at 6:30, so I was usually up a little bit before 5. Mass just before 7. We had Holy Hour most times during the week. Daily Mass, of course. During the year, we would also have every year we would always have a week-long retreat, usually a silent retreat, so no talking to anyone. You find ways to make it work, but it's part of it. We would do that both at Josephine and at Mount St. Mary's. It was pretty standard. Sometimes you would have reflection days where you just kind of have a mini retreat for a day. A speaker would come in, say a couple of things, take that time for prayer and reflection, get part of that spiritual formation. And then at the end of the year, you would always have the summative evaluations. That's like before the college. You would meet before the group of priests. You'd have to write up an evaluation, a self-evaluation. People would evaluate you. They would look at all this and they'd say, okay, so I'd come in and say, all right, Daniel, how's the year going for you? Here's what we're seeing here. We think you're doing a good job on this. We'd like to see you improve in this area, and so on and so on. And then basically they would say, okay, they would always take a vote and say, okay, so do we want to advance into the next year? If they said yes, they said, okay, congratulations. You can come back next year, based on our evaluation. Every now and then they would say, No. Again, based on what we see, we feel that you do not have a vocation, or you do not, for whatever reason, we do not think you would function well as a diocesan priest. But mostly it's yes, again, part of their formation. They want to make sure that they are training good, holy priests who are capable to serve in the parish, especially today. One thing I did not actually speak on yet quickly is on the internship year, sometimes called the pastoral year. Generally takes place between the second and third years of theology. So you take a year off and you spend a whole year at a parish. Not every place requires that. Our diocese does. And so after my second year of theology, I spent a year in Ashtabula. Spent a year there at the parish there. And then I went back to school, which is actually a tough transition. After you spend time in a parish, you do not want to go back to school. And so you would just basically go there, spend a year at the parish, learn from the priest there, try and get involved in whatever things you can and all that. Again, practical experience. And so that's basically the overall life of the seminarian, what he does, what he learns, and how the process kind of works. So, and again, that's kind of based on my own personal experience. There's a whole lot of other things that I did there, but those are stories for other days, not here. So, any questions on the seminary or formation or how it works, or maybe something I did not speak about? Or did I explain everything perfectly? Well then, if there are no questions, thank you very much. Hope you would enjoy a little bit of that. And next week's topic will be on Lent and Easter. Thank you.